So folks, here's the $1,000,000 question. Should you go ahead and take the plunge and make South Florida and the Fort Lauderdale area your home? Or is it kind of wiser to maybe test the waters first a little bit? So in this video, we're going to be your trusted guides, revealing the ups and the downs of relocating to South Florida and the Fort Lauderdale area. So by the end of the video, you're going to have greater insight to be able to make a much better and much more well-informed decision on whether or not relocating to South Florida and the Fort Lauderdale area is right for you. Have you ever really wondered what it's like to live in like summer lifestyle? So folks, brace yourself because we're about to uncover some of the challenges that await both and renters alike looking to relocate down to the Fort Lauderdale area and South Florida. So from the rise of property taxes to the weighty burden of high insurance costs, folks, will leave no stone unturned. We'll let you know what's going on. We'll let you know what we're seeing, what we're hearing. So, and of course, we're going to talk about the elephant in the room. We're going to talk about the cost of homeownership. So, folks, and of course, we are going to talk about the real estate market in South Florida and around the Fort Lauderdale area. So, folks, for decades, it's no surprise. Folks have been flocking down to South Florida and down to the Fort Lauderdale area from all walks of life, flocking down here. They're drawn by the idea of fantastic retirement. They're looking for a much different lifestyle. With the advent of folks working from home, that basically you can work anywhere you want to, and you now have a choice. You're no longer bound by the geographical barriers, the geographical boundaries for where you have to live close to your work. And folks, let's not forget the icing on the cake, okay? Florida is still one of those states that has no state income tax. So folks, sit back, grab yourself a nice refreshing beverage, okay, settle into your virtual beach chair, okay, and let's dive deep into South Florida and the Fort Lauderdale area, and let's see, is relocating down to Fort Lauderdale, is this really the right thing for you? We're probably one of the few areas in the country that even thinks about this, let alone has to deal with it. So how would you feel if there was all of a sudden a law that basically impacted potentially everybody in your state, mandating some additional flood insurance, regardless of where you live? This unexpected expense can feel like a tidal wave, no pun intended, okay, kind of crashing into your budget, and it can really throw a real kink in what your plans are. This could be adding thousands of dollars to your cost annually that were previously kind of unforeseen or unforecasted. The main driver behind this is, according to the last census, of the 8.3 million homeowners or homes here in Florida as a whole, because this is a statewide thing. This is not necessarily specific to South Florida, specific to Fort Lauderdale or Miami or whatever, although greater impacts on the coastal areas than there are obviously in the inland areas, unless of course you're close to a big lake or to another tidal pool of water. Of the 8.3 million homes, only about 22% or 1.8 million actually have flood insurance. As many as 30% of the homeowners that were impacted, significantly adversely impacted by the recent flooding back in April in Fort Lauderdale, they experienced this firsthand because only 30% of them had flood insurance. 70% of the people were kind of sitting there waiting, trying to figure out what they're going to do, how they're going to rebuild. So folks, before we start going up and running around chicken with our heads cut off, crying the sky is falling, let's dig a little deeper into this and kind of what does this really mean? From the bottom line, so let's take a look at the two predominant housing types here in South Florida and around the Fort Lauderdale area. First is condos. For condos, there's some caveats that are very, very critical to that. First of all, it's only if the condos are in what is known as a special flood hazard area. And it's also if the board is actively looking at the mortgage or if there's a line of credit on the building itself. So it's not necessarily for everybody. The other thing is that, but you do want to take a look at the proximity to water, to whether it be the ocean, whether it be the intercoastal, or whether it be some of the nice lakes and canals that we have down in Fort Lauderdale, in the Fort Lauderdale area. If you're on the first floor and that water comes in and we get a heavy rain, you're going to it could get a little dicey. For single family homes, this is where it gets a little tricky, a little bit more difficult. And this is where you actually very beneficial to work with experts like myself and my team on figuring out exactly what's best for you. Basically, the way it's set up is that all residential homeowners insurance policies that are coming into effect after July 1st, 2023, which is only about a week and a half away, they're going to have to include wind coverage, and they're going to have to, and if they're located in in that same special flood hazard area, or the national floodplain is defined by FEMA, okay, they're going to have special flood insurance for that. Okay, they're going to be required to have that. This is something, folks, that when you start looking at single-family homes down in the Fort Lauderdale area and in South Florida generically, you're going to have to start looking at this, because this is over and above whatever your homeowner's insurance is going to be. This flood insurances are not covered by this standard homeowner's insurance plan. This is something that, folks, I cannot stress this. They're two separate policies. It may be by the same insurer, but it's two separate policies. So again, and this is kind of where, again, having your realtor working with you and doing your homework for you, they'll make you aware. FEMA changes its floodplain maps every 5 years. Could have been in the floodplain on the last map, may not be in the floodplain this time, or vice versa. It could be an area that you thought wasn't in the floodplain, could actually end up being in the floodplain. And the impact of homes that are already there, that already have insurance, where things change, that's still kind of a TBD, a to be determined type of a deal. But it's something, folks, that you need to reach out to the experts like myself and my team to kind of get clarity and clarification on that. It's skyrocketing property taxes. Property taxes are going through the roof, and they're going through the roof for a couple reasons. Reason number one is that we've seen an incredible increase in property values in and around the Fort Lauderdale area, and as a matter of fact, throughout most of South Florida. Okay? And what happens is, as you buy and as you sell and whatever the transaction is, property taxes get assessed whenever ownership changes, or if there is a significant change in the property itself. Let's say you go ahead and you add another level on top of the property, you add a pool. Eventually all that catches up with the taxation authorities, and they will go back and reassess your property taxes. The biggest reason we're seeing this is because properties that sold for 25-30% less than what they're selling for now, even as recently as 2019 and 2020, we still see a very strong market from the standpoint of property values in and around South Florida and the Fort Lauderdale area, for the simple reason that there's not a whole lot of inventory still available, and folks are still flocking down to this area, coming down to Fort Lauderdale. As a matter of fact, I read recently that in 2022 there were as many as 37 million folks came into the Fort Lauderdale area alone. When you combine that with West Palm Beach and Miami and Boca Raton, you're well over 50 million people coming down in the calendar year 2022. As we said, property taxes typically they change, reassessed over whenever there's a change in ownership, whenever there's a material change in what was being done with a property. For example, you put another level on, you have to file for a permit, the building inspectors come back out, they tell you everything looks great, they go ahead and redetermine what your property value is going to be based upon the fact that you've significantly increased the livable square footage of your property. There are a couple of ways to address this, and this is something that we've worked with a lot of our clients, is going back, if you've been in your property for quite some time, and you're starting to see significant increases in your property taxes, okay, give us a call, let us know. We can either work with you, or we can certainly refer you to folks that can work with you to go ahead and basically appeal your current real estate tax assessment. That you have a very short window of doing this, and depending upon where you are is going to determine what time of the year you can do it. Typically from September through early November is when you have that opportunity. They send the notices out. You get a chance to take a look at what your new revised assessment is, and you have a limited window of opportunity to go ahead and appeal that assessment. The other thing that you're seeing is that Florida does offer homestead exemptions for folks that are using the property down here as their primary residence. Typically, if it's your primary residence, you can get between a $25,000 or up to $50,000 exemption on the assessed value. If you're over 65, you can get another $25,000 to $50,000 over that. And if other additional exemptions and other additional reductions you can get based upon whether or not you have disabilities or whatnot. So something, folks, if you're not sure, ask. It's like anything else. If you're really not sure about it, give us a call, let us know. This is something that you should be considering when you're looking to relocate down to South Florida and down to the Fort Lauderdale area. How can we look to make sure that you're paying what you should actually pay based upon an actual true value of the property, not against somebody's arbitrary and sometimes capricious just determination of what the value should be. Folks, I'm Kevin Morris of the Morris Group, and welcome to our channel, Living in Fort Lauderdale with Kevin Seuss. What we're talking about right now is probably one of the most significant and most repetitive topics that we get. Folks will call us, folks who watch our videos of what's going on, they'll see how nice things are down in the Fort Lauderdale area, and they'll ask questions, hey, is this a good time for us to relocate? So, before you go ahead and just kind of randomly make a determination, please feel free to reach out, give us a call, send us a little text, do a little email action, click on the little calendar link at the bottom of the video here, set up a time for us to chat for about 40 or 45 minutes. We would love to hear from you. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the box. And while you're at it, go ahead and click the subscribe button so you can check out all of our videos, and click the little bell at the top so every time we drop a new video, you'll get notified. It's the cost of homeowners insurance. And honestly, there's really no simple way of saying this. There are insurance companies that have gone bankrupt here in Florida. They're in Florida generally, and we're seeing it. I mean, this is one of these things that impacts the state as a whole. You see it everywhere. So it's something that if you're considering relocating to South Florida or the Fort Lauderdale area, you need to take this into consideration. You have insurance companies that are pulling out of Florida, and they're pulling out for a couple of reasons. Reason number one is that even though the South Florida area and the Fort Lauderdale area hasn't really been hit with hurricanes, severe weather recently, basically the state of Florida has been hit with it, and our friends and our colleagues on the West Coast have basically been pummeled. So, and it's a kind of share the wealth type of a scenario where it doesn't really matter where in Florida you are. When something happens that impacts the ability for insurance companies to be able to carry insurance and be able to afford to do that, okay, when it becomes unaffordable or when it becomes prohibitive for them, they start pulling out. The other part of it too is, and I really hate to say this, and it's kind of dismays, but having lived in a couple different areas, we've seen it all over the place. But folks, there is a significant amount of fraud, and by that I mean, something happens to your house and I'm not talking about, you increase the cost of the 2x4s a little bit, or maybe you go ahead and opt for that upgraded padding for the underlayment for your floor. Okay, I'm talking about what happens when folks come through and the individuals come through, for example, after a storm. We see this all the time. Anytime there's a storm, anytime there's wind or anything is blown off of a tree, there are trucks driving around through all the neighborhoods and basically telling you to your face, I can get your roof replaced for you and it won't cost you a penny. Well, folks, it's like anything else, okay? If there's no cost to it, there's probably not a whole lot of value to it too. And also, folks, if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. This is the kind of fraud we're talking about. We're talking about where they'll inflate the cost of things and then they'll vary things around. Now, you should know that a lot of these folks that do that, they are basically fly by night, and there is no shortage of horror stories and sob stories that we can tell you from friends, colleagues, and clients where they basically shelled out, maybe $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 up front until the insurance goes ahead and processes everything, okay? And these folks just disappear and they'll be gone and you'll never see that money again, and your insurance company is gonna say know nothing about it. And so basically now you still have damage to your home and now you're out $5,000, $10,000, $15,000. Folks, believe me, it happens, and it happens a lot. Not just here in South Florida, not just here in Fort Lauderdale, but essentially all over Florida. I remember living in Georgia. We lived up northeast Georgia, up around Beaufort and the Athens area. We saw it too. Anytime there was a hailstorm, we saw the same kind of thing. As I said, if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. Keep that in mind. HOA is Homeowners Association, and COA is the corresponding Condo Owners Association, okay? And folks, these have been going up and up and up, and more recently they've been going up a lot quicker and a lot more. More so on the condo side of the house than the homeowners side of the house. A little bit about both and kind of what's contributing to this. This can become a significant portion of your decision, especially if you're looking to finance, because folks, if you're looking to finance in addition to your principal, your interest, your taxes, and your insurance, or what lenders refer to as PITI, the monthly HOA fee and the monthly condo association fee gets calculated into your overall housing cost. A high COA fee or a high HOA fee could be something that keeps you from qualifying for that particular mortgage or that particular financing plan. With homeowners associations, we'll start there. They're actually a lot easier to deal with and a lot more amicable. Okay, we're seeing some changes in there, especially where the association is having like a beautification program. You'll pay a couple dollars more each month, and every 5 years you can get your house painted, or every 7 or 10 years they come out and do roof repairs for you. It's all included in your fees. More often than not, your homeowners association fees consist of any type of common area maintenance. If there's a pool or a clubhouse or volleyball courts or pickleball courts or tennis courts or anything like that, that's what the homeowners association fees are there to cover. Just to kind of give you something to do outside with it in the neighborhood. Kids can go play in the pool, kids can go shoot hoops, play the basketball. That's where the homeowners association fees come in. And they are going up a little bit. There's also some maintenance components of that. It's costing a little bit more to make keeping everything pretty pristine. Where you're really going to see it and I can't stress this enough, and I understand parts of it, but there's some of it to me that just basically, as I've said to my kids, it befuddles me. And essentially from the condo association piece. Now, the difference between a condo and when it comes to insurance, for example, is that in a condo, you're only really responsible for the contents insurance, or most folks refer to as renter's insurance. You just want to make sure that anything and everything that's inside your unit, okay, is covered by insurance. All the other insurances for the roof, for the building, for the railing, for the parking lot, for the sidewalk, for everything else, that's borne by the association and shared by all the other condo owners. Insurance costs have gone up significantly, just like we mentioned earlier. They're going up significantly. A lot of condo associations have not gone back and kept pace with what's going on with those insurance costs. It's the same thing with maintenance costs. You see the maintenance costs going back up. Labor costs more, maintenance costs more. Okay, and in some cases, maintenance needs to be done on a very, very frequent basis. If you're close to the water, you're close to the ocean, close to the intercoastal, you're going to be doing maintenance a little bit more frequently than you are if you're a little further out and you're not subject to the constant salt air and the direct impact from the rain and everything coming off of the ocean or coming off of the intercoastal. That's a good portion of it. Now, one of the other things that's kind of come up, and it's as a result of the tragedy that happened in Surfside back in 2021, but it's lovingly, look closely, you'll see my tongue planted firmly in my cheek. Okay, it's called 4D. What it really comes down to is it's redefining how reserves are going to be done and how maintenance is going to be done and how safety is going to be addressed for condos. Now, folks, this is not just South Florida, this is not just Fort Lauderdale, this is every single county all over the state of Florida. But what has to happen is that if the condo building that you're in, that you live in, or that you own, if it's above 3 stories and it's within 2.5 miles of the beach, then you're going to have to get a structural inspection every 5 to 10 years. If you're a little further out, maybe you're a little further out, okay, it starts when the building is 25 years old. Okay, it's every 10 years when the building is 25 years old. There may be some changes that are coming up because it's still going through legislation, but as it stands right now. Now, if the building's a little further out, maybe further out than 2.5 miles from the beach or 2.5 miles from the intercoastal, then it's every 10 years there's going to have to be an inspection done. This starts when the building is 25 years old. So, and folks down here, there are a lot of buildings that were built in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, so they're going into their 40th, 50th, and in some cases 60th year. So you want to make sure. Now, what this basically says, okay, is that the reserve funds must be collected and made available and basically disclosed to the owners from the standpoint of being able to not only to afford those structural inspections that are coming through every 10 years, but also make sure that you have monies provided to go ahead and at least begin to address some of them if there are significant delinquencies. What this really does is there's a lot of condominiums associations down here that in order to keep the condo fees lower, in some cases it's because folks are on a fixed income, in other cases it's because board members want to stay board members, but basically what has to happen now is that they didn't up the fees. They didn't keep pace with the cost. And in some cases they went ahead and used reserves, which are basically set aside for extraordinary or expenses for things that are outside of a year. Everybody has a budget, and basically anything that needs to be done in a year is an operating expense. You have a budget that covers that. Anything that has to be done outside of a 1 year period. So let's take, for example, the roof. Let's say to replace the roof is going to be $200,000, and the useful life of the roof is 20 years. Okay, so you need to basically set aside $10,000 a year in a reserve fund so that if and when that roof needs to be repaired, okay, that you have the funds set aside. That goes for all types of significant structural aspects of the building. The parking lot, it's the building itself, it's railings, anything safety. Elevators are often overlooked. In many cases, sprinkler systems are also often overlooked. Folks, these are things that need to be set aside. When you are looking to buy a condo, and if you already own one, if you don't have visibility into your budget, you need to be asking for it. These can come up. These have resulted in many, many unpleasant surprises to many folks. And for folks that are on a fixed income, or for folks that have a limited amount of liquid cash, this can be very, very, very stressful and very, very detrimental. So folks, you need to ask about that. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Shoot us a little note down below, ask us a question, give us a call. We'll be happy to help you walk through that. This is something that we have seen time and time again, where associations just have not kept pace with costs, and they've let reserve funds go, they let the reserve accounts fall below the 10% minimum. It's just one of these things where it's just, folks, I can't stress this enough. I really can't stress this enough. about. We say this all the time. Some folks look at us like we have, we're crazy in saying this. Okay, but folks, if you're thinking about moving down to South Florida, you're thinking about moving to the Fort Lauderdale area, we need to make you aware that sometimes we have weather-related challenges. So basically, from the beginning of June to the end of November, it's our hurricane season. Most of the severe weather shows up in the September-October timeframe. Last year, we had a hurricane come through in September. Then we had another one come through in November, which is kind of a surprise. Didn't do a whole lot of damage to us, but really played havoc with the folks on the West Coast. So this is something that you need to be aware of. I'm not talking about our every other day, rain shower that we get to wash the humidity out of the air for 30 minutes so that when everything dries out, it comes back 10 times worse than it was before it rained. I'm talking about real severe weather. This is tropical storms that come through, especially if you're close to the coast. Now, I will tell you that the folks in Broward County, the Fort Lauderdale area, and South Florida as a whole, the awareness that they have for this, the alerts that they have going on, all the responsiveness is fantastic. We've been down here since before Irma came through, which was the last one that actually came close to doing any damage to the Fort Lauderdale area. It kind of left its mark. Irma left her mark in the Hollywood area. People knew about this, almost 2 weeks in advance, and they were able to track it and everything. So it's something that you need to be aware of. And if you are a little bit afraid of concerned about severe weather, if you're a little bit concerned about what's going through, we haven't seen an Andrew type hurricane come through in a number of years. I mean, there's always that possibility, but for the most part, the building codes have been updated, things have been changed. But folks, I will tell you, there is the possibility, the potential for hazardous weather. Now, for us specifically, I will take that small percentage or that small risk of it coming through in exchange for 3,000 hours a year of sunlight and an average of about 270 to 300 days of being outside and going out and doing the things we want to do, riding our bikes, walking, going to the beach, all those kind of fun things that we enjoy doing, visiting the parks, barbecuing with our friends and whatnot. To us, to Suzanne and I, that's a trade-off. We'll take that. But folks, I would be remiss if I didn't make you aware of that. This can be a hazard, okay? And I will tell you, having been through a number of hurricanes, when it's coming through for that brief period of time, it can be a little dicey. So, folks, please make sure you take that into consideration when you're thinking about relocating down to South Florida, or more specifically to the Fort Lauderdale area. So, folks, we've gone through and highlighted some of the biggest potential risks and some of the things that you need to consider. These are topics, and these are questions that we've been asked by a number of folks that write in from our YouTube videos, folks that call in. Even some of the folks now that we've gone out and met when they find out that we're in real estate, they ask us questions about these things, okay? So, but honestly, the best piece of advice I can give you is you need to do what feels comfortable for you. And that's for you. Just because your friend moved down here, just because your parents are down here or your siblings are down here, it may not be the right time for you to come down here. So, folks, if you're going to make the move, make sure that you do the research. Make sure that you're getting the best deal for what you have, and and you're aware of what the potential risks are, as well as the potential rewards of coming down here. Okay, you're going to be investing a significant amount of money. Okay, so you want to make sure that you have as much information as you need, as you can get to go ahead and make that investment. So, and basically, folks, you really need to be kind of asking yourself, is now the best time in my life for us to go ahead and buy a house or relocate down to Fort Lauderdale area or South Florida? And basically, whatever decision you choose, okay, it has to be one that makes sense for you. And folks, it's not just a financial decision, it's also an emotional decision. So folks, if you have any questions at all, please feel free. Give us a call, shoot us a text, send us a little email, click on the calendar link. We would love to chat with you and address some of your concerns, provide you with any information that we can. And again, please feel free, go ahead and click the bell to get notified when we drop our videos. And also, if you would subscribe to let us know, and share these with your friends, share these with your colleagues, anybody that you think may be interested, or anybody that you think maybe is thinking about relocating down to Fort Lauderdale or down to South Florida, please feel free to share our video with them.